Yeah.
So, yeah.
You know,
Okay.
we do not appreciate the full staggering historicity of the moment we are living in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
We just kind of want it to be over, but
well,
yeah,
yeah, you know,
and even what over is, I mean, it's gonna, the repercussions of this are going to be going on for a long time. So, you know,
we it's podcast after podcast after podcast.
that's right. No, it really is. It really is, because just in terms
What's
of
that well-known Chinese curse? May you live in uninteresting times.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Because there's nothing to podcast about.
So, Alan, have you heard the joke about the atheist and the pastor that met in a confessional?
No, I haven't. I can hardly wait to hear the punchline.
That's right. Well, I actually don't have a punchline, but that's one of the things we wanted to challenge those of you that are listening. If you've got a really good punchline to that and it makes us laugh, that's the key. But if it makes us laugh,
maybe today is the punchline.
That's right. There you go. Then we will definitely put it in a future podcast. So send us your results.
It's like the contest at the back of the New Yorker. They give you a cartoon and you have to fill in the
exactly
the gag line.
Yeah.
That's okay. So we're right. Hey, last podcast we ripped off Desert Island Discs. Today we're going to rip off the New Yorker. Hey, we're going to rip off the best here.
That's right. Exactly. But don't anybody else dare copy us or we will sue. I mean, that's just all there is to it. So, all right. So this is the Faithism Project, and this is episode number 9. And it is
19.
Yeah, I can't even. Yeah, it's right in front of me, and it's like I said 9. That's odd.
It's almost unbelievable.
No, it really is. I mean, the next one is going to be, we're going to have to celebrate the next one somehow.
Yeah.
So all right. So 19, a few confessions about confession. And so I want to start by confessing that my name is Randy Lovejoy, and I am a pastor without a church.
And I guess I'm going to have to confess that my name is Alan Katz, and I've always been grateful to Hebrew School for making me the atheist that I am today. We are, as I think we've played, we're talking about a few confessions about confession today. Now, neither of us are Catholic. Randy is not. I'm not. So the whole idea of confession is a little odd. This is institutional confession is something that grew out of the Catholic Church, and it's a fascinating thing, and we're going to talk about that today as two outsiders to that particular brand of religious whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the questions that we're going to raise are, all right, what is confession? What is the confessor confessing to? And hey, what gives the or the person that is being confessed to, what gives them the authority to hear anything? We'll talk about all this.
That's right.
Before we dive too heavily into confession, I wanted to just reference back to our last podcast. Highly recommend, if you haven't listened to episode 18, I'm gonna toot our own horn a little bit. Well, we were talking about 3 songs and 1 book that we love, and no, I think if you're enjoying us, I think you'll really enjoy that one. There was one song that I did not make my list, but as I thought about it afterwards, I just wanted to mention it because this one song, it didn't meet any of my other qualifications. The only thing it's got going for it is that I kind of sing it to myself every day, usually towards the very beginning of the day.
And it's not Happy Birthday to Me or something like that.
No. I'll give you the lyrics, and I think that the melody will kind of come to you. Okay. I can see clearly now, the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way.
Gone are the dark clouds that had me blind.
Bright, sunshiny day.
I just love that that's the song you mentioned, because I actually have a memorial service funny story about that exact song. Is it appropriate at this time for me just to share that briefly?
Hey! I just interjected my. Hey, well, like, I guess I was confessing about a song I sing to myself every day. So you might.
Well,
as
and I'm
confess
confessing
too.
about, this is a confession about being a pastor at the start of a funeral that didn't start off like it was supposed to. So the daughter of a guy that had passed away gave the CD, sorry, to a guy in the back of the sound booth, told him what number to play, and somehow he played the wrong disc. So the funeral actually started with that song. So we started the funeral with, it's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day, and people are looking around, and I was up in front, I was doing this to the guy, like, cut, you know, but so we ended up just having to work right through that song and then just act like everything was fine. Oh, yeah, it's a great song. And
I'm trying to think, are the lyrics in the second verse any better? I think no.
It was one of the. It wasn't really one of the high points of my ministry at Silver Lake Church, but
was it Silver Lake?
It sure makes a good story. I'll tell you that. But
who was the dead guy? Anyone we like?
No, he actually wasn't a member of the church. His daughter had been at the church, and so she kind of set that up. So yeah, there you go.
Well,
so all right,
thank you for confessing that, Randy.
That's right. Oh, and I've got plenty of other things to confess. You know, we'll just save some for future podcasts. But
now
there was a lot that happened.
My relationship to confession is completely a complete non-starter. But you have a very different kind of relationship with the idea of confession, because unless you really understand that, okay, Catholics do confession and Protestants specifically do not. Well, all right. Well, is that true? Do any Protestants, the atheist asked, do any Protestants do confession, or is that strictly a Catholic institutional thing?
Well, I mean, the definition we're using so far of confession is need to be clear on that to make sense to answer your question, because confession as a concept, everybody does in Christianity and in a lot of other religions too. It's just everybody does it in a different way. But the confession, like a confessional booth to a priest, that is something that definitely developed in the Roman Catholic tradition. Because even like the Orthodox, which there's a long story about how the Orthodox and Roman Catholic split centuries ago. But, the Orthodox don't even have the same system that the Roman Catholics have. So if we're talking a Roman Catholic system, definitely Reformed and Protestant groups and even Orthodox don't have the exact same approach to that. But for those that grew up Lutheran, they're probably saying, well, wait a minute, we had confession and absolution. And yes, that's true. Lutherans continued it in a bit of a different form, but Luther himself felt that it was a very helpful and critical part of Christianity. But then Calvin, who, Presbyterians, a lot of Reformed people come out of Calvin and from Geneva, he felt like it was really kind of a tyranny for you to have to go to a priest. And it was between you and God or you and a friend. But he was against the whole priest thing. But Luther wasn't quite that hardcore on that.
That wasn't one of his theses that he nailed to the, was it theses or feces? It was theses. It wasn't theses,
yes,
it was
definitely.
theses.
Be careful with that word. You've got to be careful with that. But yes, no, definitely that was not where his argument came in, because he was actually a guy that had a lot of struggle with his own failings. And that had a lot to do, as a monk, and that had a lot to do with him finally arriving, at the place that he did that was critical for the whole Protestant movement. So that part didn't shift for him. And then interesting, I mean, I'm just going to throw this out because I was doing a little research on this, that, in Buddhism, there's a monastic framework where, and I'll probably butcher the word, but where they do something called shanga, which is a regular confession of wrong to other monks, and that's mandatory.
But
and then in Islam,
is that a monk to other monks, or is that just a
monk to other monks?
Not
yeah,
a
what at least
Buddhist
what I read
to a monk.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like if you're taking it to that level,
You have to be inside it's like one of the higher levels of Scientology, you mean?
Well, hopefully not, but we'll move on from there. With Islam, there's confession, but it's direct to God, but it is required. And even in Hinduism, there's an aspect where you accept your errors and misdeeds and confession and repentance and all of that. So the idea of confession is something that seems to really cut across all sorts of different forms of human spirituality. And heck, for that matter, you know what, I got a great quote from C.G. Jung, where he really said that the confessional was the prototype of psychology, psychiatry. And then, in AA, there is definitely a confession aspect, not a confessional, but there's an aspect where you're going back and telling people the things that you have done wrong. So it's interesting, just as a human phenomenon, that it seems to be global. But yeah, there's definitely a distinction between Catholic approaches and Protestant approaches, for sure.
The bottom line, though, the word contrition, isn't that really at the core of it? What you're confessing is, I recognize that there's a difference between right and wrong, and what I did was clearly on the wrong side of the line. Now, again, the question is, who is making the judgments as to right v. wrong? Whose rules are we confessing to having violated?
Yeah, I think there's one step prior to that's really fascinating to me, which is, why do we have this innate sense or whatever it is that we need to come clean? Because all of these systems and processes, I don't think they would have been a lot tougher to develop if it didn't start with something going on with us as humans, where when something goes a certain way, we recognize there's a problem there, that something's broken, that something's different. And if you don't, then you're a great candidate for the whole serial killer genre, of TV and movies, because you don't even have a sense that you did anything wrong. So it's definitely built on something, and it's fascinating to me that it's built on something that seems to be pretty common among human beings.
Let me ask the question this way.
Sure. Yep.
Now, the way that Randy and I first knew each other is socially. We were in the same social circle in the Silver Lake
that 3
section.
times fast, right
the
there. Yeah.
Same social circle in the Silver Lake section of Los Angeles. Woo! Oh my God.
It's too bad it wasn't around soccer, because then you could add another S there.
Surely. So anyway, that was the search. So I met Randy, and I don't think I knew you were a minister until well into our relationship. I think we'd slept together several times already.
Gosh. Oh, I'm just not even going to comment on that one.
Sorry, no, it was not more than once. Come on.
Speaking of confessions, yeah. No.
So, no, it was. I think we'd been to any number of parties. I think we've gotten hammered together any number of times, and I think we might have talked about politics, but I don't think religion ever came up. So that that. All right. When, as I've said on this podcast, when suddenly I learned that in fact what you did for a living is what you do for a living, well, that just made you, having said what I said before, it just made you sexier in my eyes. It made you more interesting.
I am not going to let my dad listen to this podcast. I'm sorry.
But in the intellectual sense is what I'm talking about. I'm not in the Bible. I've never known him in the biblical sense. I just I gotta stop confessing. It just made Randy more appealing as a person to talk to and ultimately as a friend because, but my question is, I didn't suddenly look at you and think, well, I don't think I changed. I don't think I changed how I was toward you. I don't think I suddenly, I didn't feel compelled to suddenly say, Randy, I must tell you all the worst things I've ever done in my life. That did not occur to me. It really, the opposite occurred to me. I wanted to see how far we could push this.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Now that's just me, and I'm.
Okay. No, that's good.
I'm a
That's
schmuck.
good.
I'm a schmuck.
Yeah.
All right. Other people in our social circle who might not have known what you did for a living. Now, when they learned what you did for a living, did any of them suddenly look at you a little bit differently? Do people, when they suddenly go from knowing you as just, hey, Randy Lovejoy, a great guy, to Pastor Randy Lovejoy?
Oh, yeah.
Stand in for God.
All right, I got two quick stories on that one that I think are classic for this. Because bottom line is, yes, people tend to change. And so I don't like to tell them that I'm a pastor until well into the relationship.
Until they've already confessed everything? God.
That's right.
That is so bad.
The first Chamber of Commerce meeting I had at Silver Lake, a wonderful lady, very involved in the community, invited me to be a part of a committee to do something. So I was happy to do it. I was probably a couple months in as pastor in Silver Lake. So she introduces me as, this is Randy Lovejoy. He's the pastor at Silver Lake Church, just over here. It was at the coffee table. Remember where the coffee table used to be?
Sure.
So I'm at a table with about 8 people. Everybody visibly stiffened. I mean, I could see it. And then one guy who was very upset looked at me. I just met him, right? He looked at me and he said, "What's your church's policy toward gays and lesbians?" And it was in that kind of a voice. And I'm just like, okay, I just met you. I don't even know what to do,
And suddenly your father Cowlin.
That's right. No, I mean, seriously, it was hardcore. And I'm like, wow, it's crazy how my profession has such an impact on people. The other, I was on an airplane flight and, we were in a row of like 4 in the middle, large airplane. It was me and one other guy. We started talking about Ludwig Wittgenstein. He was a philosophy guy. We were having a great conversation, but man, he was cussing a blue streak as he was talking about it with real passion. And then at one point he's like, "So what do you do?" And I was like, I said, "Well, I'm actually a pastor." And from that moment that word left my lips, he transformed. It's like, I couldn't know. It was like, okay, I can't get to know this guy anymore. He is just shut off who he is because he knows I'm a pastor and, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have used that language. And so I really prefer to not tell people what I do if possible, because it's a way more interesting conversation in many cases than after they find out what I do and then they shut down, So yeah, that's 2 of many. But I'll tell you what, when I tell people I'm a pastor without a church, that doesn't happen. Then they're like, "Really? What's that? Tell me about that."
Would you get kicked out?
And suddenly I'm not threatening anymore. So it's fascinating. Fascinating.
So yeah, you're like, God, you remember in the Grapes of Wrath, there's the Reverend character. He no longer is, I can't think of the character's name, but he's the Reverend character, and he no longer preaches, but in the end he kind of gives himself up to save Tom Joad, and his initials are JC. Strangely enough.
Nice.
I can't think of the character.
That's subtle.
But
love it. Well, that's the deal. And let me ask you, have you been in a situation, I mean, you said you use the word schmuck, I believe, is that what you called yourself? Or not?
In Yiddish, it's funny, the word schmuck is interesting. The word means jewel.
Okay.
It means jewel, but ironically, it's used. It can also mean penis or a person who acts like a penis.
Okay, well, you use that word. I didn't.
No,
Okay,
no,
let me
but-
just
but,
make that
hey,
clear. But
that's the joy of Yiddish is that it's got there's so much.
that's
anyway.
right. Well,
Yes,
point
I
being,
described myself as as occasionally a schmuck.
point being, have you met pastors or Christians in general that support the stereotype of kind of okay, that person, it's dangerous to just be myself. I need to back off. I mean, have you experienced that? Or I'm just interested in if you have, because that's a big stereotype. And I think that's something a lot of people worry about. And there definitely are people. I'm not going to try to prove they aren't, but I was just interested in you personally, what or just religious types that seem very.
I would answer your question this way. I've been involved off and on with a project for a bunch of years. I think I told you about this project. It's the one about, based on a true story about three cousins who were all born around about 1935 in Faraday, Louisiana. And in this swirling gumbo of intense Pentecostal Assembly of God, fire-breathing religion, music. I mean, gospel, hillbilly music coming out of the Ozarks, and blues, and of course, family dynamics as they can only be down in that part of Louisiana. These three cousins grew up together playing boogie woogie piano. One of them became the country music star Mickey Gilley. And another became the televangelist Jimmy Swaggart, and the other became the killer Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yep.
And
Yep.
Jerry Lee Lewis and Jimmy Swaggart are first cousins on their father's and their mother's side, because it's Louisiana.
Yeah.
And
wow. Interesting.
It's amazing. Jimmy Swaggart and Jimmy Swaggart and Jerry Lee Lewis are flip sides of a very twisted coin. I had the pleasure of doing a lot of research on the project. I got to spend a weekend with Mickey Gilley talking to him about his cousins, and that was so much fun. What a lovely man! What a really lovely man. And he's caught between. He loves his first cousins very deeply, but he cannot get these two men that he loves to really have anything to do with each other. And back in the day when they were young kids growing up, learning how to play, well, they were inseparable. The thing about Jerry Lee Lewis and Jimmy Swaggart being flip sides of the same twisted coin, Jimmy Swaggart was always incredibly jealous. He confessed, really being jealous of Jerry Lee Lewis's success. He might have said he didn't, but in many ways he confessed. But perversely, Jerry Lee was very jealous of something that Jimmy had, and that was his relationship with God. And Jerry Lee always said that his story was that he sold his soul so he could play rock and roll the way that he did. He told a story, Jerry Lee did, that one day when he was a little kid outside a friend's, 5 or 6, outside a friend who was a black sharecropper family, little kid. They were playing outside the shack, and sitting in the window of the shack is an old gramophone, and playing is Robert Johnson's Terraplane Blues. And Jerry Lee just stopped and listened to the sound of Robert Johnson playing and singing. And he said, "Wow, how's that man sound like that?" And his little friend said, "My daddy says that man sold his soul to the devil so he could play that way." And Jerry Lee Lewis told the story himself that in his mind, if that's what it took, that's what he was going to do. And so in his mind, that's what he did.
That's how he got what he had there.
Now, the thing about Jimmy Swaggart, and here's, as I bring this all around to answer your question, I never got to meet, not yet. There's still time on this project before these guys died. There's still time to meet Jerry Lee, and that would be sort of interesting. The guy I really want to meet and I want to spend hours talking to is Jimmy Swaggart. for the very reasons that we're talking about, and because he's had to confess twice to, to not living up to, But I don't judge him. I honestly do not, knowing what I know about the man, having read everything and talked to his cousin and I so empathize with, I mean, from the moment the guy was really able to walk and talk, he was basically told, you're going to be like your daddy's son. You're going to be a preacher. He never had a childhood. He literally never had a childhood. He was raw. He was taken from him. He wasn't allowed to. And that stunted him. And then I think it kind of broke something inside of him. And it's, my heart goes out to him. And so in the sense of a priest who says one thing and does another, in a rather conventional kind of way, my experience of them is, frankly, I see the Elmer Gantry, but if I really look closely, where Jimmy Swaggart is concerned, I'm strangely empathetic. I'm not very empathetic toward Jim Baker. I think Jim Baker's a scumbag. Jerry Falwell Jr.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a professional grade scumbag. Wow. And the audacity to then go and try to sue Liberty University. He just dropped his lawsuit, but
no, I hear you. I mean, that's fascinating to hear that. And I remember when you first told me about that project, it really caught my attention. I'm like, wait a minute, there's an atheist who's fascinated by this. Now, what I expected was an atheist to think, well, look, there you go. Great proof that this whole thing is fake, because look at look at these people. But what I loved was your sincere desire to actually get to know these people and a sense of trying to understand how they're working underneath, like what's going on, and even finding something compelling in somebody like Jimmy Swaggart that catches your attention. And that was one of those things that I remember early on. I was like, now that's interesting. I did not expect Alan to come at it in that way. And so
in order to write a character, you have to get inside their head. You have to
right.
Once you get inside a character's head, most of us walk around justifying what we do.
Yeah.
And if you understand that everyone is walking around, we might not understand their justification, but they certainly do. And so you have to see the world from their justified point of view. And in order to speak, in order for them to speak through you have to surrender to their point of view.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
So you really have to be empathetic. You have to allow yourself to empathize, even with, I've always had in the back of my mind, there's a project of, oh God, I don't know if I'll ever get to having to do, there was always a story. There was always the suggestion that there was Jewish blood, that Hitler had a little bit of Jewish blood through the Schickelgruber part of his family.
I've heard that. Yeah.
And I was going to do a story about what if on the eve of World War II, it turns out there was a cousin, a Schickelgruber cousin, Jewish, and Hitler saves him because Hitler loves him. He's the one person that Hitler loves, and he's a Jew. And he doesn't want to be saved by his cousin, the fascist. And so Hitler is forced between to do something terrible because this Jewish person who he loves won't behave and just go along to survive. So I always wanted to do a story about that. But in order to make that play, you had to allow the monster to feel love.
Well, and seriously, I mean, I think it's that inquisitiveness that you have that is really critical to this whole project that we're doing together. If you didn't have that kind of inquisitive wanting to understand what's going on, even behind the stereotypes, then then this would be kind of a non-starter. So I love that about you, and I think that's one of the things
Well, thank you.
that has made this possible is you there's this inquisitiveness that you have.
Nobody, and again, it's another writer storyteller thing. Nobody does anything for no reason. If you try to write a character who does stuff for no reason, you got nothing to write about.
Yeah.
You literally, you got nothing. It's a null set of stuff to write about. And so you have to invest in the characters, and you have to invest in why people do even the stupid things that they do.
Yeah.
Even for the stupid things, we all have a motivation. We may not be able to articulate them, and they may not be for the best of reasons, but there's always something pushing us. And inside that, what motivates us is an awful lot of who we are.
Yeah.
Which again, in a way, what I do for a living as a writer, I see myself as somewhat priestly. Because again, in order to write the characters that I'm writing, I must understand them top to bottom. I got to understand why they succeed, why they fail, why they're good, and why they're bad.
Yeah,
and really.
Yeah, and Yeats, another a writer, at one point he says, the sympathy of all living things, sinful and righteous alike, which the imaginative arts awaken, is that forgiveness of sins commanded by Christ. At another point, he says, great literature is the forgiveness of sins. I just thought it's some really fascinating ways of thinking about this. And a lot of authors and writers, I think, have felt that there is some kind of confessional aspect of literature in different ways, and I found that to be a really fascinating.
I mean, isn't that really why we love stories? We want to see ourselves inside stories, and if we want to see something heroic of ourselves in the hero, we after I came through my dark period, so as I spent 15 years going through a rather deep depression, I thought for the longest time that what I did for a living, a storyteller, was absolutely frivolous and pointless. When I came out the other side of the darkness, I reminded myself of how important all storytellers are to a culture. Yep. We're not just, well, to a degree, we are the psychotherapists on the fly who always have our finger on the emotional pulse of the culture that we're a part of. And if we're good, we're reporting very honestly from the front lines of our quotidian existence what we're doing, what we're thinking, what we're feeling. Yeah. And we're the ones who are articulating that in a, this is Hollywood, so there's acting. In the acting coach Meisner, it was pinch ouch. If you wanted to really be real on the stage, if someone pinched you, your ouch should not be acted, it should be real. Pinch ouch. That's,
Oh, that's good. I mean, that's good. And I think that's, the storytelling is absolutely critical to a society. And it reminds me, I don't have the quote here exactly, but Nietzsche was talking about the important role of artists. And at one point though, he said that they can become something sycophants of the existing culture or something. But basically what he was trying to do was to say, if you're an artist, do your art in a way that doesn't just reflect culture, but do your art in a way that draws people from there into a new perspective or reality and story. That's one of the powers of story. I mean, we talked in the last podcast about the power of music, but the power of story, it can take us places, and it feels
so long
like
as it's honest.
There.
So long as the story and the storyteller are honest. I just flashed on to one of the most popular visual artists of all time is Vincent van Gogh.
Mm.
And the thing that people adore about Van Gogh, not just the colors, his palette is it's the naked emotional honesty
Yeah.
that he
Yeah.
puts. His emotional state is right there. His last couple of paintings are, you can see his last painting, the crows and the cornfield, and the cornfield is, wow, you can see his emotional state right there in the brushstrokes.
Yeah.
It's part of what I think makes art, what gives it longevity, is honesty.
Honesty, but in a way that's, let's stick with confession. Honesty in a way that's confessing, but, and I think what happens sometimes is when art is used to promote something, it loses that honesty, and it's, it's kind of like, if you think it just the, like the South Korean, North Korean propaganda art. It's interesting, but it's not honest. It's like, it's something else. I don't know. And again, I'm not an artist, but it's like art in the service of,
yes. It is. It's art, art's propaganda. It's there are a couple of experiences I've had in my life where I've gone to the theater, the live theater, and the experience has been, excuse me, absolutely transcendent, like a religious experience, where you sit there in your seat and the show finishes and you have experienced a real catharsis.
Yeah.
I've had this happen a couple of times. The first time it ever happened to me was, I think it was 20, before, or 20, I was 22, 23. I grew up in Baltimore, and I went to school in New York, but in between school and finally setting out in life, I was back and forth between Baltimore. My parents in Baltimore had a subscription to an equity theater called Center Stage, and Center Stage put on great shows with great casts. And one night, my parents, there were tickets they had to a show called The Amen Corner by James Baldwin. And my parents, for some reason, couldn't go, and they offered me the tickets. And I said, "What's the Amen Corner? What's it? It's about a little church in Harlem, little black church in Harlem." And I thought, oh, that does not sound anything like I could possibly remotely care about. But they said, "Oh, you can't waste the tickets." I went, "Okay, that's the theater. I like going to the theater." So I went to the theater. Now, I'm telling this story as a confession, in part because my prejudice got almost interfered with a religious experience that I'm so grateful I had, that I thought that story could not possibly touch me. Oh, silly boy, silly boy. Blew me away. The story is of this little storefront church in Harlem. I forget the characters' names, but the woman who is the preacher, she runs this place with an iron fist, and she's genuine. She's a real servant of God. She loves what she does. She's really important to her community. Her husband, kind of ex-husband, jazz musician. They've been separated for a long time. They have a son, and he's come back into the picture. I think he might be dying, something along those lines. And he's come back to try to make things right with their son. And she has a hard time with it. And she sees this as a battle between good and evil. She's good, he's evil, and there's their son in the middle. It's an amazing piece. And of course there's, he's a jazz musician, blues musician. And so there's a lot of music. Mm-hmm. And her struggle is deeply religious, but deeply personal. And that just blew me away. I think I know I was the last person sitting in the theater as they were clearing out, and they go, "Sir, you have to leave now. Really, you have to get up and get on your feet, and you must walk out of the theater now." And it had to do again with the nature of the spiritual struggle, and again the confessional nature of the characters and what does blew me. Come on, it's James Baldwin. And of course the characters are fantastic and they're wonderful and they're deeply etched and you cannot get them out of your head once you've experienced them. And 50 years.
And it sounds like, again, too, that there was some kind of an honesty in the portrayal that grabbed you. And I think that's one of the thing I wanted to highlight with confession to me, or confessing, is that actually the English word confess, it derived from the concept of one who avows his religion in spite of persecution or danger, but does not suffer martyrdom. And so there's two ways we can talk about confession. One is, as we've been majoring on, I think, in this conversation. The other is that you're confessing what you actually hold to be true, what you actually believe. You're confessing that regardless of the impact. But I think both sides of that are related to honesty. It's both the honesty about our failures, and it's the honesty about
who we are,
who we are and what really motivates us, what beliefs actually motivate who we are. And I think both of those are really important for us as human beings individually and in relationship with others. So I love that idea of the honesty that you were talking about in writing and even in this play, and the importance of that even in relationships with other people that we're connecting with, in a way that the Faithism podcast, the project, is all about.
At the end of the day, when you strip off all your own artifice, excuse me, and you're honest with, when you're honest with yourself, the confessor inside of you, that's when you might have a fighting chance to, when you're honest with the confessor inside of you. Now, I don't know about anybody else. There's an experience that we all have that's very, very personal and very unique to us. We stand in front of it's usually a bathroom mirror, and we look ourselves in the eye and we talk to ourselves. We have a very personal conversation, and we are grateful that no one else knows that we do this, because they would think we're crazy even while they're doing it themselves. We all have an inner voice inside our heads that's as much a part of how we perceive ourselves to be us as our faces. Somewhere it's that combination of the voice that we recognize as us talking to us and our face. Somewhere between those is the approximation of us. And as we stand there and we look at ourselves in the mirror, and I know I had this thought as I was thinking about this show last night, as I was brushing my teeth, getting ready for bed, it suddenly occurred to me as I was talking to myself and responding to myself, that really and truly I was confessing to myself. And it is this inner father confessor, sister confessor, whatever confessor. If you can't get right with that, you cannot get right, period. And so regardless of what you say to anyone outside of the little temple that is your head, it seems to me that's where the problem or the payoff. And confession can have, if you're willing to be really, really honest with that person to whom you talk to in the bathroom mirror, you have a fighting chance at overcoming all your own stuff. And I say that from experience.
Yeah. No, and that makes me think back to it's some ancient deal. I don't know if it's Greeks or before that, but it's just this idea that know thyself,
Yeah.
that's the
To thine own
beginning.
self be true.
That's right. And I do think
Yeah.
that's critical
Yeah.
for all of us, because having worked as a pastor with folks, there are people that are much more self-aware, sometimes just naturally, than others are. And some of the people that end up doing the most damage are the ones who really can't see
Mm.
how they're coming off or what they're actually doing. And so they think, well, I didn't do anything, but everybody else in the room's like, actually, that's because you're not willing to really look at you.
Because you're a sociopath, dude.
That's right. So I agree. I think that is so essential, to be able to really look at yourself. And then, I would add the next step, which is to find a trusted person that could actually even reflect back to you with some honesty, because
Yes.
no matter how good you get at that bathroom mirror, there's still going to be some things that there aren't many people that have the courage to actually tell you you're doing, unless you've got that.
There is always the possibility to that the little voice inside you is lying to you.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
I know mine did. I know mine did. That was part of like I went through that long, long depression, and I didn't know why. I didn't know why it was telling me the terrible things about myself that it was insisting were true.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the, you can get, the notion of confession can be a trap.
Yeah.
And I had a situation where I kept a secret from myself for 45 years. That was why I was depressed. I had kept a secret. It was beginning to come due.
Mm-hmm.
It needed to be dealt with. It undermined my confidence in a gazillion ways. I needed to confess to myself that this thing happened. I needed to stop denying that this thing had been done to me. Yeah. And that everything that flowed from it. Look, you live 60 years of life. Yeah, you're going to screw up things. And I did. And I did. Yeah, that lack of confidence probably was the cause for me to do a lot of rather silly, self-destructive, not very bright things. Yeah. Until I was able to confess to myself that this thing happened to me, I was not going to get right with myself, and I was going to continue to blame myself for every terrible thing that ever happened to me, because I got it in my head that at 14 years old, it was my fault that I got molested.
Yeah.
No, don't be ridiculous.
Yeah.
So suddenly you take the notion of confession and you use it incorrectly as a cudgel. I got really lucky. I really did, but I didn't. I almost hurt myself, but at the end of the day, I got really lucky, and I had a great therapist. So that other person to begin to give you the perspective. The thing about darkness, the thing about depression, it robs you of all perspective. It convinces you that the world is this teeny, teeny, tiny place that it keeps telling you as you stare at yourself in the bathroom mirror. You're looking through this very narrow thing. You almost can't see yourself anymore. All you can see is this narrow thing that this voice is telling you. That's all that's left. That's all that's left. Well, this is nonsense. Whereas, again, if one could be honest with oneself, maybe I would have discovered this secret. I had to come clean about it sooner. From the moment that I had to get over being depressed before I could deal with that secret. To be fair, I couldn't go right at that. It was too big. It was too hard. Yeah. But once I started taking a mood stabilizer and got over my fear of that and did all the work involved in the research, and I stopped punishing myself, and I gave myself the chance. Well, once I stopped judging myself and allowed myself to have the conversation, an honest conversation where suddenly the person staring back at me in the bathroom mirror was me, and not some twisted version of me that was furious at myself for no good reason. Made a huge difference when suddenly the confessor was more honest. So the problem is, and here's where, as I look at my situation and the person that I was confessing to for all those years, who had me believing something rather terrible about myself, I wonder if an institutional confessor doesn't have the potential for the same abuse. It's not looking at you. And again, I'm taking a metaphor and I'm throwing it into reality to a degree, and yet I'm not. And yet I don't think I am. At the end of the day, once I was able to come clean with myself, the way that it occurred to me in the aftermath as I began to get better, and I've written a book which unpublished. I'm still writing the last chapter. It's a memoir. It's called How to Live Bullshit Free: A Practical Guide to Not Killing Yourself. What I had done in my thinking to get to such a dark place that I thought I could disappear and my family would get over it in time. Well, let's be quite honest, that's bullshit. Mm-hmm. But my darkness had convinced me that this was true.
And that narrowing that you talked about, I mean, that's I've seen that with a lot of folks too, that the world becomes really narrow. And that's why you can sort of believe, well, when I'm out of the way, my family will be better off. And it's like, no, actually,
no.
You've missed the entire grieving process. They're going to have to go through the wounds. You're going to leave them, all of that, you know.
It is nuclear bullshit.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me as I was beginning to get better that I had come within literal inches of bullshitting myself to death. And I laughed for 5 minutes when I thought of that. And then I stopped laughing because it suddenly occurred to me that, okay, all right, the bullshit had almost killed me. In what other ways are you bullshitting yourself on a daily basis? Excuse me for 1 second. It's the darkness talking.
That's right. But a quick question. I don't want to, but do you think that the kind of psychology of what you were going through, is that something that everybody as humans goes through, or is it something that only some people go through and for whatever reason other people don't? What is your experience been with that?
I think everybody goes through it.
Okay.
I think the only difference is that because of my skill set, I can articulate it. That's the only difference between me and anybody else. I happen to have a skill set where I go, oh, okay. That's what this is. It's this feeling. It's that feeling. This is the experience. And I just have the ability to put it into words. Everyone goes, oh, okay. I see what you're feeling.
Well, and then also,
but I think this is what everyone else literally, I'm not special.
Well, and I think that, but I do think that the energy and the courage that it took, wherever that came from, the energy and the courage that it takes to work through or out of that darkness is something else that's really critical in your story, because not everybody has, not everybody makes it through. There's
a moment in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I can't remember any of the characters' names. There's the king who has been, there's a curse that's been put on him, and he's now old and aged and of
the Rohirrim.
And suddenly it's lifted off him, and the age comes off of him, and suddenly he emerges from it. I know that feeling. Actually, I would even put it this way. I understand what people who say they've been born again mean. I absolutely understand down deep on a cellular level. Yeah, I feel like after what I went through and how I am now, how my life is now, I would say, absolutely, I was born again. in a spiritual sense. I rediscovered my passion for life, my passion for writing, my passion for everything.
Mm, mm.
And
That's
really,
interesting.
and
Yeah.
part of, as I began to really, as I said, I looked at how I was motioning myself in small ways every day. And, and we all do it. There's a lot of it is just necessary to get through a day. I'll lie in bed for 5 more minutes. No, you lie in bed for 15. No, I'm going to be late. You bullshitted yourself.
Mm, mm,
Harmless.
mm,
It's incidental, no harm, no foul. It's when you get up into the other stuff where you begin to compromise yourself and you tell yourself things about your relationships or why you do certain things, or why you don't do certain things. And you're lying to yourself.
mm,
And you let these lies go.
mm.
And after a while, they begin to accumulate a kind of heft. They begin to weigh your life down. And
Yeah.
really and truly, it's the bullshit it's the tail wagging the dog that is your life. And I made a concerted effort to stop doing that. I don't worry about anybody else's. I got too much of my own to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I don't deal with anybody else's stuff. I deal with mine. And it's a full-time job. And I really, I make part of my point every day is to try to catch myself as many times as possible bullshitting.
Mm, mm.
And really in a confessorial kind of a way, it's my inner confessor going, stop that, stop,
Mm.
stop.
Mm.
As a way, it's a constant kind of contrition. Is what it is. So rather than letting the contrition, all that, the bad stuff build up, especially the toxic bad stuff, the compromises, the stuff that can overwhelm your life if you don't deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
If you bullshit yourself into thinking, oh, it's not a problem. It is a problem.
Right. Yeah.
It is a problem. The thing you have to confess is a problem. And that's
it's back to that honesty again. It's really an honesty that you're not willing to sweep things under the carpet. You're not willing to just look the other way and act like it's not happening. But that you're willing to confront, and even confront yourself, which is sometimes the hardest person to confront, and say, wait a minute, what am I doing? What is this? What is going on?
Can I put it this way? The truth will set you free.
Well, that would be like a good scripture, I think.
Damn. Damn.
No, I mean that's it. That's
and
it.
On that bombshell.
I like it.
I think we've brought it around as we do.
I think it's a wrap. Now, are we really going to try to revisit our prognostications next week? Or I was sitting there thinking there's some stuff we could talk about. There's some other stuff that hasn't happened yet. The other shoe hasn't dropped. So I'm not even sure. What do you think?
I think we push it into January because I think this story is still.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in January or February or March. I mean, it's just going to be a fascinating, and I'm not just talking politically, but just in terms of life as a whole, what the heck's it going to be like in March? I don't know. It will be.
America is in a transition. We are living in a transitional period. We are moving from one thing very definitively to another.
And it's not even just us, because the international, the international connections that had been developing over time, they're all going to be impacted too. So globally, I don't even know what
pandemic is like a world war.
Yeah, but it may be even, in a sense, more expansive than even that, because it really is the whole world. We're not talking about the West or something. We're talking about
neutrality. You can't be Switzerland.
Are there any like islands anywhere that haven't been touched by COVID? I got to check, like tiny islands somewhere where nobody has it.
There might be. One of the ways New Zealand has been very successful in part because they're an island.
Yep.
Australia has done okay because of the island. You can keep people off your space.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, well, we'll decide what our next topic's then going to be. But I think we need to postpone it just because that way we can do a better job of looking back at what we said and talking about what happened.
We'll add some perspective.
That's right. That's right.
Time plus perspective equals, yeah.
Yep.
Another day. But in the meantime, Randy, thank you for hearing my confession.
Hey, man, glad to do it as a friend.
Or should I say, to our audience, thank you for hearing my confession.
That's right. Exactly. That's right.
And we
confess to yourself. You know, that's a great place to start. Is make sure you're being honest with yourself.
Start by being good to yourself. Start by being good to yourself and honest with yourself. Don't bullshit yourself.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
Till next time, Randy.
Have an awesome evening, and we will talk again soon.